has said that a meeting between Donald Trump and Putin had not been cancelled, as the US president described it, and that the two leaders will likely meet at a later date. The planned summit was put on hold as Russia's rejection of an immediate ceasefire cast a cloud over attempts at negotiations. Trump said he cancelled the planned meeting with Putin in Budapest because of a lack of progress in diplomatic efforts towards ending the war and a sense that timing was off. However, Dmitriev has said that he believes that Russia and the United States and also Ukraine are, quote, quite close to a diplomatic solution to resolve the conflict. Meanwhile, Dmitriev has also said that Europe aims at disrupting any possible direct dialogue between Russia and the United States. We're now joined by Professor Veselin Popovsky. He's a professor and vice dean at Jindal Global Law School, and he joins us live from New Delhi to discuss these statements from Vladimir Putin's special envoy from Washington. Thank you very much, Professor Popovsky, for joining us on these latest updates. Okay. Some strong statements there from one of Vladimir Putin's closest men. Quite contradictory. Of course, we've seen some pushback on that meeting from Donald Trump, cancelling that meeting in Budapest, which we thought was going to be some sort of a breakthrough, a possible breakthrough. However, there seems to be some hope from the Russians that there is some sort of diplomatic progress that's going to be made between the United States, Ukraine, and Russia. Your thoughts on the statement here from Putin's special envoy, Dr. Popovsky?
Yes, Thomas, you correctly put it that it's a hope when he said, I believe. And that's a manipulation. No other signal we see whatsoever to have any progress in Russia, specifically to end this war. So what Dmitriev is saying is simply a nonsense. They try to do that. They try to be open and to say we are happy to negotiate. And when it comes to any negotiation, Russia is the party that refuses ceasefire. It refuses to accept what Donald Trump even demands. So absolutely nonsense to believe that without a major change in the position of Kremlin, any such meeting can deliver. Well, a meeting may happen, like the one in Alaska, which produced zero effect, zero, nothing. And what Russia is doing is exactly the opposite of that. You mentioned the bombing again overnight in Kyiv. Kindergarten has been hit. The same happens every week.
Professor,
sometime.
We'll talk about that in just a second. What are your thoughts on the fact that Dmitriev said, no, this meeting has not been cancelled in Budapest between Trump and Putin. It's merely been postponed. This leader-to-leader dialogue is going to happen, this grand meeting in Europe between Putin and Trump. Trump said it had been cancelled. What are your thoughts on the envoy's statements there?
Well, it has been cancelled, obviously. It won't happen. Maybe in the future, probably, but that's what Dmitriev says. He said it was postponed but not cancelled, which is again nonsense, because we don't see any signal from Washington or from Budapest or from anywhere. Actually, Trump is going to meet the Chinese president. He's going to Korea. He has other plans. Obviously, Russia is not in his priority, and that's bad news for Kremlin. And all they can say is that it may happen sometime in the future. But when there is a signal that such a meeting can happen, Russians always go back and they keep striking and they do not cooperate. For them, that's the only chance left, to try to persuade that they are open for diplomacy, but in fact, they are not open for any diplomacy. They want to continue the war. So a statement which I will just leave aside as another propaganda, as another nonsensical statement by Dmitriev. It's not a news for me.
Who has the White House right now, Professor Popovsky? We've seen, of course, Zelensky releasing statements. He seems quite not smug, but he seems satisfied by the way things are going. Obviously, he does want those tomahawks. He is obviously getting those face-to-face meetings with Donald Trump, and they seem to be going much better, of course, than they were earlier in Donald Trump's presidency. Who has Donald Trump's ear now?
Well, definitely Zelensky is the hero here. He met 3 times the King of Britain over the last months only. He's everywhere. He's in Europe, he's in London, he's in Washington. He talks to every leader in the world freely. He flies everywhere. Of course, not everything can happen quickly, but the support Zelensky enjoys in every capital in the world. And compare that with Putin. The only countries Putin can go is Mongolia, North Korea, and China, and that's it. And Alaska once, but never again. So this is the geography of Putin's trip, Mongolia, North Korea, and China. And look at Zelensky, who met the King of Britain 3 times in the last 6 months. So what does it tell us? Who is the leader that the world support and invites? And he has been everywhere, not only in Europe and America. Zelensky was in Asia, he was in Saudi Arabia. He meets everybody he wants to meet, or make phone calls to Prime Minister Modi or of India and so on. So in terms of diplomatic isolation, and Russia feels that every day, that's why Dmitriev talks about possible postponement and one day in the future we may meet Donald Trump. That's the only thing Russia is left with. Some hopes that one day in the future Putin can meet someone. Yet it might not happen. A war criminal indicted by the International Criminal Court cannot go anywhere in those 123 countries signatory to the International Criminal Court. He can go to Mongolia, by the way, a signatory, but Mongolia allowed him once to go, but nowhere else. So the geography of Putin visits is very limited, and it will be even more limited.
Yes, Professor Popovsky, do stay with us. We have further developments coming out of the Russia-Ukraine conflict. The United Kingdom's Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, has hosted a meeting of the Coalition of the Willing in London with French President Emmanuel Macron joining via video link. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has thanked Western allies for new sanctions aimed at crippling Russia's war economy. He urges partners to boost Kyiv's long-range missile capabilities. Zelensky also says diplomacy matters only if it leads to real decisions. He adds the more losses Putin suffers at home, the faster he will consider meaningful talks. Let's in fact listen in to what the Ukrainian president had to say.
Diplomacy matters only when it can lead to real decisions. And when it comes to Russia, that dish has many ingredients. The essential ones are real forms of pressure on Russia, sanctions, our long-range capabilities, political pressure, accountability for war crimes, and real actions regarding Russian assets. Today, besides, we are carrying out our own campaign of pressure with drones and missiles, specifically targeting the Russian oil sector. So the long-range capability directly strengthens diplomacy, the more losses Putin suffers on his own territory. The fewer assaults he can carry out on the front line, and the faster he will agree to meaningful diplomacy. That is why we are working to secure Tomahawk cruise missiles, additional Storm Shadow missiles, other capabilities. Thank you very much, Keir.
Meanwhile, the French President Emmanuel Macron announces that France will deliver additional Aster anti-aircraft missiles to Ukraine in the coming days. This comes as Western allies ramp up support for Kyiv amid Russia's ongoing offensive. The meeting comes as the war enters its 4th winter, with the US and EU pressing Moscow harder than ever. Now over to Ukraine, where Russian drone and missiles have killed at least 2 people and wounded more than a dozen in multiple regions of Ukraine. Kyiv Mayor Vitaly Klitschko has said that Russia has struck the Ukrainian capital with missiles and with drones. The mayor has stated that the attack has damaged buildings and homes in multiple districts and wounded at least 8 people. The mayor has added that 3 people have been hospitalized and that large fires were seen in non-residential buildings in the Zelenskyy and Darnivsky districts. The head of the city's military administration has said that damage has occurred in the Donetsk district as well. The attack comes as Kyiv's Western allies ratchet up pressure on Russia as the war enters its 4th winter. Earlier, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer urged allies to bolster Kyiv's long-range missile capability a day after EU leaders took steps towards funding Ukraine's defence for another 2 years. The United States and the European Union also announced new sanctions this week on Russia's energy aimed at crippling its war economy. We are now once again joined by Professor Popovsky. Let's first of all, Professor, dive into why does Ukraine want these long-range missiles when it's trying to defend itself from Russian aggression?
Well, certainly, Ukraine has absolute justification to have the long-range missiles because the way to defeat Russia is to bomb military targets, only military targets, so energy infrastructure, oil refineries, and to reduce Russian military capacity to fight the war. Airports where all these strikes and missiles come to Ukraine, as you mentioned, the daily civilian targets in Ukraine should be prevented by the long-range missiles that Ukraine wants. So absolutely justifiable in every war. Ukraine should be given every weapon it wants, as long as it can hit into the Russian territory, military target. Ukraine is targeting only military objects in Russian Federation. Never ever we hear those civilians, very few collateral damages, once in a month. But every day almost we hear about civilian casualties in Ukraine, which basically suggests who is hitting civilian targets and who is hitting military targets. Ukrainians need that long, and the good news is that we more and more often we hear that the West, Europeans, United States even mentioned tomahawks, as you said, Thomas. Yes, the direction is going there. Yes.
And of course, the diplomatic strategy here is Russia is saying that it wants peace, but Donald Trump isn't blind to the news. He sees these things going on. He sees the news of people dying every day, and the civilian casualties. What is the aim of Russia here in these strikes, especially when he hits these densely populated areas like the Ukrainian capital of Kyiv?
Of course, we don't see any willingness to negotiate in Russia. We discussed this earlier. So basically, this is a manipulative statement that Russia wants diplomacy that never get any diplomatic achievement so far. And the question about the strikes, well, they need some good news. Putin wakes up in the morning and there is no good news. Trump canceled the meeting in Budapest. What is the good news of Putin in the morning? That some children in Ukraine were killed by Russian drones. That's the only good news Putin can have. He's isolated, as I mentioned before. He cannot go and meet any other head of state around the world, apart from North Korea. So the only good news for Putin in the morning, and the military tried to please him with some good news by saying, we capture a village over there, but 2 days later they lose that village to the Ukrainians and they don't report that. So the only strategy for Russia is to give Putin some good news to please him. And the only good news is that 2 civilians were killed in Kharkiv, Kyiv, Odessa, or anywhere else in Ukraine. So there is absolutely no movement of the Russian army. By the way, do you know this famous anecdote that the snail, the slowest animal in the world,